Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert Rand, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of various facets of Magento Extensions, and I have some great guests with me from the team at Headworks, one of the most prominent Magento Extension development teams, been around a long time and produced a lot of high-quality Magento extensions. With no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Artem and Alex to introduce themselves, and we'll just start picking their brains, see what's going on in the wild, wacky world of extensions.
So, hello, my name is Artem Kuznetsov. I'm working for Headworks for 10 years already. Started here at 2010 as a support member, first line of support. So basically, I was was having communication with the customers via tickets, via live chat, and then I was promoted to support team lead. And for the last 3 years, 3 or 4 already, I am a product owner here. Currently, my position is senior product owner. So basically, everything which gets published in terms of extensions goes through me.
Yeah, and I'm Alexander Gelso. I started with the Headworks around 8 years ago as vice president of partnerships and communications. Then we parted our ways for a few years, and now back as chief operations officer. So then again, I'm mostly working closely with Artem and other members of the team in terms of moving our products further.
And Artem, I hope that you don't go back through old tickets and find communications with me, because that won't help our relationship one bit. Alex, very glad to see you back at the Headworks team. I can remember some great times out at Magento Imagine in previous years, and I remember one year that you brought some really, really good chocolate bars with you from Europe. So
it was actually the first year that I came to Imagine, and yeah, we brought wine and chocolates back then.
I don't remember the wine, so I must not have been on the special list that year yet, but it was the first. So, but the fact that I remember the chocolate bars is scary. That has to be a pretty long time ago.
And we will correct the mistake with wine next year.
No, that's okay. That's okay. As our listeners know, I don't need any special magic elixir to loosen me up. That I'm ready to, just say what's on my mind all the time. So, I know one of the biggest changes, Headworks is now part of the RaveDigital team, that the Rave Infosys team and Headworks came together and now formed RaveDigital. How has that transition been for your team?
The transition was pretty smooth, I would say. Basically, not a lot of things has changed since then, meaning in a bad way. Nothing changed in a bad way. Small adjustments were introduced in our workflow. We communicate more with US and India team. The transition itself was pretty good. Right before acquisition, our new owner Ravi came here to Belarus, spent here for 3 days, I think, 3 or 4 days. Had communications with our team just because, his goal was, as he explained, is I'm not buying products, I'm buying a team, actually. So he understands that human resources are the most precious, the most valuable thing here. It's not just to buy the code and go away. It was actually pretty good. I have nothing to compare with, but it didn't affect me, any of us, in some bad way.
Well, no, that's all I think you can really ask for in any kind of merger or acquisition is a smooth transition. And I know Ravi and the Rave team as an agency. They're actually headquartered down here in South Florida, in my neck of the woods. So I get to see the team when we're not all socially distanced and quarantined and whatever we are these days. But but I think it's an interesting pairing. Sometimes it might be more difficult to integrate to companies that do exactly the same thing, that perhaps do custom development only, or something like that, where there's very different processes sometimes, or there's overlap in the team. And in your case, marrying together an agency and an extension team seems like a pretty good pairing. And I imagine that you probably run into some requests and needs that their team is better suited for, and vice versa. And that's probably a really good way of solving people's problems.
Yeah, and operations-wise, there is a solid distinction between these two parts of the business. Headworks remain the product arm of the RaveDigital family. We understand that there could be a conflict of interest with other agencies, and we try to separate, in this sense, separate the Headworks as solely a product company that interacts with other development agencies as partners. And we have close interaction with RaveDigital, and we help them out whenever Headworks can help as a partner and as a partner company.
That absolutely makes sense. I think that all of us in the partnership world, we have to walk that fine line that, for instance, when an agency brings a customer to our team here at JetRails, they have to be able to trust that we're going to honor that, and we're going to try to make sure that the customer is well taken care of, and we're not just going to be pushing some other partner toward that customer randomly, or something is something that wouldn't be responsible or ethical. So I think that comes with our industry, that you have to build relationships and you have to build trust, and that absolutely makes sense. So I guess that change has settled in, but the COVID-19 crisis maybe not quite as much. What's changed for your team, specifically at Headworks?
Yeah. So first of all, about 5 weeks ago, most of our team.
It just feels like 5 years. I know.
yeah, it's been a while. So yeah, most of our team is remote, so we're working from home. Me and Artem just came to the office to record this podcast, but basically there are barely any people except for us here right now. So this was one huge step, because all of us are used to live interactions within the office. So we're still learning ropes here, but yeah, getting there. Other than that, in terms of business sales, we're not seeing any significant or visible impact as of now. I would say there's a bit more fluctuations from day to day. Like things used to be more stable a couple of months ago, but overall, it's pretty much at the same place. Then we're also seeing changes in demographics. We're seeing more customers from Asia. Not sure how to explain it, but that's a fact. And
these customers, actually, the most of customers, instead of writing "thank you" in the end of their message, just adding "stay safe" or something like this. So
yeah,
this is a sign.
Signs of the times. That it's nice though that people stop to recognize that the world's a little bit different, and care, and hope for others, not just for themselves. So I'll take that as positive. I'll accept that any day of the week. I think good things. Interesting though to see demand increase from Asia, or at least communications. Have you seen other trends in the Magento extension ecosystem in recent years? Have there been noticeable changes? I know that obviously there's a lot that's changed in terms of some of the target audience of Magento. in terms of the versions of Magento and the acquisition of Magento. Have you run into anything in particular that that's been really more of a change on the business itself, or how you operate or who you deal with?
Yeah. Well, first of all, getting back to the previous question about
Yeah.
people from Asia, we are actually not sure if they are located in Asia. Just it's more like we're judging by their names mostly. you know. Yeah, this is one change, and we're also not sure if it's related to COVID-19 somehow. Maybe in part, but not definitely not completely. As for the other changes for the recent years, is that well, when Magento stepped in more like higher category.
Yeah, with the acquisition, well, Magento has started moving up market even before the Adobe's acquisition. Well, before they acquired Magento, and I would say that we are seeing this trend growing stronger. We definitely see much less one-man bands, like one-man operators of online stores. It's well, almost every time that would be a company, a business that would hire a development agency or that would have in-house development team. So this is one of the aspects, and of course, this reflects on the total amount of Magento 2 stores. There are less of them, but they have clearer goals. Probably they have certain budgets. I would say that their budgets are probably higher on average. So this would be the main change. And yeah, of course, the Magento 2 release would change the landscape significantly, the overall Magento extension landscape.
Yeah, and speaking of the people who we communicate with, meaning now it's more like development companies, integrators. It's a little bit different way of communicating with them. What I mean is that when I just joined the Headworks, there were a lot of people who really not very skilled in development, and you had to explain some things that can be basic for someone. For example, funny cases, when I just joined, we had communications with some guy from India, and we told that you need to set up set up your own job. Everything should work since then. And the next day he came back and said, "Oh, my store is broken. Everything is broken. Have a look." And our technical guys opened the cron PHP file, and there is nothing there. Only one sentence like, "Please run every 5 minutes," and that's all.
Oh my Lord!
So you can imagine. That was.
I would love to see that one line. But it happens. Luckily that people had somewhere to turn and that your support team was there. But that's the equivalent, somebody calling me because their computer won't start, but it's not plugged in. You're not going to get very far with that. I would say I've also seen an improvement in the overall quality of knowledge from folks in the industry through the years, both because there are just more professionals in the industry, and so there's more people you can turn to that have the experience and understanding, but also because on average the sites are bigger, that I'm running into fewer sites that are sort of homespun e-commerce sites built on Magento, and so the businesses that have them, that they're investing a little bit differently into good development teams or internal developers or what have you, that that are going to be more advanced than that. That's
everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah,
everyone started somewhere. That's for sure. Very well said.
Now the entry level of Magento is much higher, right? You can just finish some online PHP courses and start building something in Magento. You need to learn specifics of the platform. So the average level of the developers is much higher than it was back then. So yeah, and communication is different needs, different demands.
Also, there is much more resources nowadays, both provided by Magento and the community. But there's much more information now regarding proper practices and
absolutely, and more certifications. I mean, I don't always look at the certifications as the be all end all answer to somebody's actual firsthand experience. You know, you can have a degree and have no real world practical experience, and not really be ready to hit the ground running. But it's still, there's a lot that you can do that's a really good sign, or that really gives you a leg up to be farther ahead, to be able to do more. So glad to hear that, at least from the support mechanisms that you have, that's noticeable. That we can see that improvement. And I guess we know that an amount of some of those startups, those homespun businesses, built from a coffee table or a kitchen table or a garage, that they're often going SaaS these days. Do you get any feedback from the market on, the users that you work with, why they've stuck open source, why they've continued forward with Magento? By the numbers, we certainly don't see the same volume of adoption of Magento 2 as we saw in Magento 1, although we see bigger sites and higher quality sites. Do you see any feedback from merchants that go in one direction or another?
First of all, when Magento started more than 10 years ago,
it's 2009, I think.
2009, yeah. There was much less options. Did I say it right? Fewer options. Yeah. So if you want to go open source, you select Magento. Otherwise, I don't know, Shopify was already there?
Not particularly. I don't remember what year Shopify started, but I don't think it was, well, even once it did, it took a while to come of age. The same with other SaaS platforms, BigCommerce and so on. And some, I'd say, started off a little bit stronger, that there were Yahoo stores, and there's still, to my knowledge, some folks on platforms like Volusion. But, winners and losers over time, you just couldn't meet the business requirements on a lot of those SaaS platforms, even once they did become available. So they were really young and didn't have a lot of apps or a lot of ability. That's true.
Financially, for the stores that's starting out there, it may make more sense to go with the SaaS for the starters. But if you have any specific requirements, if you need flexibility of open source, then there aren't many options apart from Magento.
Yeah, and I'm going to tie this back to something related to a Headworks, but I imagine that when I've seen bigger stores try to go SaaS, they often spend a lot of money in monthly recurring fees for the SaaS platform. Things like credit card processing that are often baked in. They wind up paying for a lot of monthly apps. And I imagine that you're part of the reason that folks like to stay Magento. Not only is the code on-prem, they have access, they can edit and customize. It's more flexible. They can get more custom with their site, but they don't necessarily have all those long-term ongoing fees where basically they have all these partners sharing the revenue on an ongoing basis.
That is true. I heard from many customers that they don't like the idea of paying monthly fee, and just the regular phrase is, don't milk me every month, something like this. So when you when you got an extension, but it's your code, and you are free to do everything with it, modify it according to your requirements, and you don't have to worry about anything that of sudden changes.
And the data remains within the
Exactly,
web
yeah.
hosting environment. It's owned by the client. When you start to get into all those apps, sometimes that's another concern that the data is not all yours. In an age where merchants are competing with marketplaces like Amazon, that you sell on Amazon. Amazon knows exactly what's your top seller, and they can see everything. I think there's something to be said still for the open source world, and a little bit of controlling your own destiny. Going back to changes in the last few years, how has the rollout of the Magento Marketplace gone for your team? I imagine that it has changed some of your processes and some of your resource allocation. Has that been a good thing? Has it? Would you say that it's a net benefit to the users and to your company?
Yeah. The main, first of all, I regularly see some kind of, especially on Reddit, people just writing that they don't trust that Magento Marketplace is actually testing the extensions. Well, the news are they really do. The testing is quite a thorough process. First of all, they are running just when you submit the new version. They are running automatic testing, and we also in our pipeline also implemented this exact testing.
Practices.
Not practices. There are standards,
Yeah.
right? So all our extensions automatically gets tested on our side, and then we pass them to a Magento Marketplace. They run automatic tests. They are running installation. They checking the code for plagiarism, copy and pasting. And then the final stage, and I'm speaking about only technical review here. The final stage is a manual testing, and this is actually can be very tough because when they find one bug, they just sending it back, and you fix this bug, sending to review again. And they find another bug, and this can go quite a long. This can take quite a long time actually to get your
So this is an expense in essence, but it's helping to institute best practice. So
yes,
I guess so that
definitely
that makes sense. I know that our team has a couple of free extensions out there, and so we go through some of that as well. That in order to put out something free for the community, there's definitely process and requirement there.
Yeah, probably they do not test every possible extension. For example, you need to have a sandbox when you want to test a payment module, and it's not always this trivial to get a sandbox. You need to sign up as merchant, get some merchant keys for sandbox, etc., etc.
So they could look at coding best practice, coding standards, but they don't necessarily manually test against the payment gateway for a payment extension or something like that.
Right.
That makes sense.
But when it comes to just extension, like extension of some without any connection to external service, they definitely checking it, sending feedback, sending videos, how to reproduce the problem. Sometimes it gets very tricky when we cannot reproduce this bug, and they can, and they send video. We do the same, and nothing is reproducible. It comes down to specifics of environment where they testing. So, but you cannot pass this manual stage anyway. At least I think maybe this they have separate approach for different tiers. For partners, it should be more thorough review. I don't know, but for us, this is tough reality.
Yeah, there's no skipping it.
Not actually tough because when the extension gets published on Marketplace, it means that it's like a quality seal, something like this, and
Well, and that was a big part of going from the original Magento Connect site to the Magento Marketplace, where I used to call Magento Connect the Wild West, because merchants would find something there and they'd think, oh, it's listed there, it must be okay. They didn't just randomly find it in Google. Well, no. It was just basically a directory of listings. People could put up whatever they wanted. And I guess that's another net benefit to the marketplace, that they're doing a marketing review. So for better or worse, they're also reviewing what the content actually says, and hopefully to some extent trying to keep it a little bit more standardized and honest and valuable, making sure that certain things are disclosed one way or the other. So some net benefit.
And this from this perspective, meaning if you pass marketplace, then it's a quality sign of quality. So I can tell that all our extensions for Magento 1 are currently listed.
Magento 2.
Oh, sorry, for Magento 2, currently listed on marketplace, and and if you go and check for just like go to Magento Marketplace, check the 2.3 version, and you will see that a lot of extensions by Headworks on the very first page. So we're taking proud of it.
Yeah, well, a lot of hard work there. Would you say, thinking about Magento 1 and 2, at the patches that have been put out for Magento 1 in recent time have been pretty minimal and mundane, small patches? Most of the work that your teams had to do in terms of upkeeping extensions, would that be mainly the Magento 2 extensions, because there's just not much change to the M1 extensions one way or the other?
Yes, pretty much. Like the vast majority of our resources are going with Magento 2. There's not much support of Magento 1 extensions. I would say that there aren't many sales as well. Like the people, well, I would say that the way it looks from our end, M1 merchants are not actively looking to expand the current functionality of their M1 stores. So with M2, it's a different story.
Yeah, M1's an old car. They're not going to put a bunch of new parts in. They're just going to maintain it and keep it running.
Yeah, and so in terms of support requests, it's also kept to the minimum.
Yeah, I think a lot of us in the industry are seeing the same. That as a web host, we put together programs to help people stay secure after end of life and give them a leg up for keeping their PCI compliance intact. But that's being dealt with merchant by merchant. That not everyone is going to follow those practices. Not everyone's going to have exactly the same needs. For instance, there are some stores that their online catalogs are such they don't take credit cards. Their focus isn't specifically PCI compliance, but security might, or should hopefully continue to be very important. There are other stores that are locked down to only whitelisted IPs and things that are for select uses and B2B behind the scenes use case. And so again, security for them needs might be different than they are for another particular store. So we try not to look at it as an all or nothing either. But our goal is to continue to support merchants how they need to be supported. But let's get back to you.
Merchants need the support.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to, is that, and especially right now, I'd like to think that there are merchants that their cash flow isn't what it was. There are other reasons why they may not have a new site launched when they thought that they would, or have some of the options that they might have had previously. So we just want to take away whatever pressure we can and let people continue to operate as safely and effectively as possible. But and we know that not all web hosts, not all payment processors, not all anybody are really putting a ton of focus on those particular users. But it's a changing landscape. And speaking of, how has the competition in the Magento extension ecosystem evolved in recent years. I imagine that the Magento Marketplace probably chased out some of the very low quality stuff that had been produced previously. Maybe it, as I'd say, thinned the herd a bit. At the same time, maybe Magento user needs have changed a little bit with some of the functionality of M2, and with the average user being a bit larger on M2 than the original Magento 1 user base. Have you seen any impact on who you're competing with, or who else is out there building extensions out there in the marketplace?
Well, for for competition, I can say that I don't see a lot of newcomers in the extensions space. At least, maybe I'm just don't see it. I don't. Maybe I just don't know about them. But when I search for something in Google, I see the same old faces, same competitors which we had in M1 era. They are on the first few pages of Google. So if there are any newcomers, they are definitely struggling with SEO.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine that, when you have a team like yours, the merchants have often been on the platform for a while. The developers have certainly often been part of the ecosystem for a while. And so there's an amount of trust that they know your support team. They know the success that they've had in the past. I'd like to think that it could be hard for a newcomer to break into a community like this where there is history. Especially because there's also history of a lot of bad extensions and bad extension developers. And not thinking of that in a personal way, just when you have extensions that are that wind up with security issues, or wind up work having a lot of conflicts and that don't get worked out very well. Things like that, a lot of wasted dev time and support time, and I guess people don't want to be burned.
And the cost of a mistake is higher now. So
yes,
no one
yes, higher than ever. Especially because I think more users are following best practice. They're doing things in a development environment, pushing it up to staging, publishing it up to live. So they're testing it in different stages. That process takes more resource. And if it's a bigger site, if there is, a bug or problem that makes it up to live, that's going to have a bigger impact. More traffic, more sales impacted, whatever it may be. So I guess that all makes some logical sense. How has the breakdown for you remains, considering that on average the merchants might be larger, when it comes to Magento Commerce, Magento Enterprise Edition, and the Community Edition, Magento Open Source as we now know it?
Yeah, we take in terms of sales, in terms of amount of orders, 80% would go to Magento Open Source, and about 20% would go to Magento Commerce. It's been pretty stable for the past year, so I wouldn't say that there are any drastic changes there, but yeah, that's overall the picture that we see.
And thinking in that vein, I know that Magento Commerce extensions, the enterprise extensions, typically sell for a little bit of a premium. Is that because you're going to sell maybe 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 extensions are going to be enterprise, so there's less volume, so you have to make up for it in some way, or is there some logic that specifically goes through how you price community versus enterprise, commerce versus open source?
Yeah, that as well. First of all, the market itself is smaller. Of course, they have bigger budgets, but the amount of Magento Commerce merchants is smaller, way smaller than Magento Open Source. Then also, we still need to test our products thoroughly on Magento Commerce. And Magento Commerce has its own unique features and architecture particularities that we also have to take into account. Also, in order to have access to Magento Commerce license and Magento Commerce code, we need to be a partner, and we need to pay partner fee on top of everything else. And we need to keep maintaining that high level of quality that we're famous for. So all these coming together, yes, it results in somewhat higher prices for Magento commerce licenses, but we're thinking about lowering all of our prices all the time. It's just that we're in a very competitive market, and it's not like it doesn't occur to us that it'll be great if we could charge less. But
well, and I imagine not every extension winds up selling quite as much as you'd hope, that there's an amount of investment that you make into these, and some of this has to average out, that at the end of the day, you have to be able to have an operating budget. So especially without specific recurring revenue in most cases where you're selling one-off items, you've got to be able to set it at a price where you can provide quality.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And also the support part of the question, you need more knowledgeable resources to work with Magento Enterprise. When someone from with Magento Commerce license come to support, their demands are quite specific. You need to have some certain amount of knowledge just to understand what they want to do. They speak different language. They have sometimes they have a very special vocabulary, especially for B2B part of business. So it's all stacks with it's all stacks, and in the end we've got some amount of Magento Commerce clients, and we need to put a lot of effort just to support this, to offer the proper level, to offer a proper level of support to them.
Yeah. The one that enterprise-grade companies would expect.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that they're also expecting very fast response times compared to maybe definitely a smaller store that can wait over the weekend. In some cases, they're really looking for very fast turnaround time. With keeping commerce in mind, I know that some of your extensions add functionality that comes with Magento Commerce. I imagine that helps out a lot of smaller users that that aren't yet at a point of going to commerce, that don't have that budget, or that a cost benefit analysis of going to Magento Commerce, it's just not going to align for them. That commerce is great when it's the right fit. Open source is great when it's the right fit. Are there particular extensions that you think help to bridge that gap, to help some of those smaller open source users have some of those commerce style features?
Reward points, gift cards. Recently, we started to work on B2B line of products. Of course, we don't compete with Magento.
Of course, yeah.
Enterprise, because it's not the point. The point is to help smaller businesses to grow.
And then possibly get on Magento Commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, we run into the same. We host Magento open source sites. We host Magento Commerce sites, but we don't necessarily see it as a pure competition with Magento Commerce Cloud, for instance, that they're very different products. Our support team picks up the phone in 10 seconds for anything and everything. The style support that Magento Commerce Cloud provides is differentiated. So we wind up with folks that have more of that high touch monitoring and maintenance and management, support need. The same way that we auto scale horizontally and vertically, we take on categories that they don't, like CBD. We deal with compliances like HIPAA that they don't. And so we find that there's an amount of the time where we're very complementary, where the ecosystem needs both of us to exist, based upon what we do and what they do, in order to meet the needs of different types of businesses, different style businesses. So just the same, folks that need a more tailored environment, that want to run WordPress or specific extensions or other things in the environment that won't operate in a more rigid prefab Magento cloud environment. They need an environment that's going to architect around them, like JetRails will provide. That's not everyone. And so we do try to make sure that, we're there as part of the Magento community and ecosystem, and not in conflict in any way. That we don't think ill of anyone, I hope. It's just about what's right for the merchant, and what's right at that time for them, and with the budgets and other concerns in mind. So no, I'd applaud that kind of thinking. That when the free market gets to do what it's supposed to do, and the user gets to determine what makes the most sense for their business, I think we all win. I think that when and that's what's made Magento a great ecosystem. That's what's made events like Magento Imagine, which I miss very much this year, as fantastic as it's been. It's not monopolies in the industry. It's it's open source. It's choice.
Yeah, and also some enterprise merchants choose our extensions, which actually are covered by default in Magento.
Yeah,
price like RMA, those points, because sometimes our extensions are built with a little bit different strategy in mind, or for example, it offers some features that lacks in Magento commerce. So
and there is not popular enough demand for Magento to seriously consider including it.
Yeah. They can't be working on everything all at once, and meet every possible need. There's also, I imagine that there are some people that upgrade from open source to commerce, and their data is sitting in one of your extensions, like gift cards or such. And it makes more sense to continue forward with that than to try to transform and migrate the data into the Magento Commerce feature set. So if you're sitting with reward points and in a Headworks extension, that it might just be easier to continue to use in a Headworks extension, even if you go to Commerce. Just about, again, it's a cost benefit analysis. What's going to work out for that user? What's going to be the most cost effective and logical for them in that moment? In some cases, sticking with what you've already been doing can just be advantageous to the business, even if you're upgrading your software to Commerce.
And then again, everyone wins.
Yeah. Were there extensions that you found?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, as you made that transition from Magento 1 to Magento 2 in terms of a majority of the business and demand and such. Are there extensions? I know a lot of your catalog had to have moved from M1 to M2. Were there some that didn't move forward because Magento 2 just handled something natively, or that you moved forward from Magento 1 to 2, but the demand just wasn't the same? Any particular experiences in that growth in the last 4 or 5 years of really changing the focus to M2, which sounds like it's the same thing, but it's just not?
Yeah, the best example maybe is minimum advertised price, which is included in Magento now, and fulfills most of merchant need, I think. Also, multi-source inventory. We didn't have this back in Magento 1. I believe we considered this, but didn't make it. And now we've got MSI built in for everyone. So also, speaking of extensions which were built, well, we knew that it will be the case, but still, Ajax Card Pro extension is not that successful as it used to be back then, just because when it was like Magento 1.4, Magento until Magento 1.7, I believe, it wasn't many themes with responsive design and so on and so forth. So you couldn't get rid of page reloads unless you've got this extension when you add something to cart. And then themes evolving, Magento 2 evolves, and now you basically have this add to cart feature without page reload, so this extension gets obsolete. But it's normal. It's just everything evolves. So
Yeah. Well, and I imagine there's probably some extensions that you put out, like, you mentioned MSI, the multi-source inventory, that didn't come out with 2.0. So, there are probably things that you brought over and that eventually, as new features have been released for M2, that the need for an extension might have changed. So I guess that's always got to be part of the business plan, is that you have to expect the unexpected as the roadmap evolves and as new features.
But the good thing is that when you've got MSI now accessible for everyone, not only Magento Commerce, you can build something on top of MSI, and this whole another story, and it's actually good. So I don't see any problem here. Same question goes for what happens when Magento adds something new and you've got extension for it. Well, that's okay.
I imagine that's happening with, even in some cases, people building custom extensions or things that are going to work with the newer PWA Studio, folks building things that are going to work with some of the Magento B2B features that were released a year or two ago, which are still rather young, just like MSI is still rather young. So I guess that some of these, they probably open up opportunity as opposed to closing doors. That's really an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, Magento raises awareness with such releases. More merchants realize that they actually need these features. Some merchants, like B2B merchants, they didn't even consider Magento as a choice, as a platform of their choice before Magento started moving in that direction. And then again, everyone wins. And apart from building our own B2B functionality, we can also expand on things that Magento provides. We can cover more use cases here. We can be valuable to more merchants.
Yeah. And, I know one of the extensions that I expected, perhaps erroneously, to go down in demand was Magento 1 had a 5-step checkout. Magento 2 natively offers a 2-step checkout. And, so I just assumed that some of the 1-step checkout extensions wouldn't be as popular, but I know that that's well showcased on your site. What's the experience been with that?
Native Magento checkout is good, but we've got our own extension, and it's actually one of our top sellers. So it's not like if Magento has some functionality that nobody needs this extension anymore. A lot of businesses have their own requirements, and if our checkout satisfies their requirements, that is good. Also, in fact, some merchants customize our extension, our 1-step checkout, so it looks like old 5-step checkout in Magento, because it's actually
it worked.
Yes, it worked because if you think for merchants know their audience, right? And for older people, maybe it's easier to go step by step instead of just seeing this whole.
Because depending on the device that someone's using, you have the data and your analytics, and you can test. You can. I mean, it's not impossible to collect data on both and see what's going to perform over time. So that's really interesting.
If you take any piece of functionality that Magento offers, it's almost never one size fits all, especially when it comes to Magento. Like, many businesses have their unique needs, and they need to cover these needs one way or another.
Yeah. And so if 1-step checkout is still, a top seller, an in-demand extension, what else is really in demand from your experience? So whatever you're willing to share on that topic, have you seen that some of your other extensions are really continuing to go strong for you and really meet the demands of the market?
Well, blog extension is another top seller, and actually this one is especially popular in enterprise for enterprise merchants. Many of people are moving from WordPress blog to our extension. Just I guess because it's a good fit. It works with page builder, and you've got all the data in the same box. You don't have to worry about all these security problems, which is WordPress notoriously famous for. Actually, at least it used to be famous for. I don't know about what's going on there now in terms of security, but
I'm in the middle of writing up for a partner a blog post, an article on WordPress security, and I'm already over 3,000 words. It feels like it's turning into a term paper. So I can understand where you're coming from. Just like Magento security, I think any of these CMS systems come with their own security challenges, and so you really do need to step up to the plate with them. And there's maintenance and monitoring and management of the platform. So I'm with you there that it makes absolute sense that for a lot of folks, if they just need a blog to leverage a system like yours.
Yeah, especially because our extension better integrates with Magento. You can
one database,
one database. You can put the products and with add to cart button right into the blog post. There's a lot of things which can be of good use for merchant, not only enterprise merchant, but also community merchant. Next, also we've got advanced subscription products, which is my favorite product of all. It's very complicated, but I can tell that this is one of the best extensions in the ecosystem. One of the best subscription extensions, one of the most featured. Also, layered navigation, which is also bundled into Magento for a long time.
Faceted search with search filters. It's pretty much a requirement for any site that has any serious volume of product. For search results for category pages. I don't know how you live without it.
Yeah, so layered navigation, also add free product to cart, a small extension, but it's very popular, and also gift card is very popular. These are top extensions. Sometimes it's fluctuating from month to month, but top three are one-step checkout, blog, and subscription products.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the current crisis has any effect on what's in demand. If anything changes in that normal, top 3, top 5, top 10 list, just because user needs are different at the moment. Shoppers are looking for something in terms of the experience or functionality a little bit differently.
Well, it would be an interesting idea, but the problem here is that you don't go and buy extension just like I want this extension.
No,
I will go and buy it.
Unless there's a need, like right now, people setting up for curbside pickup and they need some kind of a shipping system, like a shipper HQ or something in a rush. So, I imagine that there's a limited amount of those sorts of activities at any given time.
And so extension purchase is somewhat, to make a decision,
other than something like GDPR that comes up, I don't imagine that there's too many things that just, rise to the top very quickly.
Yeah, and also seeing from a support perspective, it's not like someone just buy extension and the next day goes live with it. Sometimes people buy extensions in advance, several months in advance. For example, a dev agency got a project, they buy all the extensions and then install it by one during several months. So, it's very difficult to see an immediate demand caused
Yeah.
by COVID-19 or something else.
I got pulled into a conversation with a partner last week, if my memory is working, and they were asking how small could we get a dev server set up, because it's not going to be the live instance, it's not going to be a live production environment, and that's all quite normal. And they're estimating that the Magento 2 build is going to be, I think it was 9 to 12 months, which even for my, that's a pretty significant build. That's a pretty significant project plan. So, looking at that, it made sense that they were going to try to minimize the dev server budget. But when you think about that, and who knows exactly what the hard launch date will be, that those things come up in testing, things happen. I'd like to assume that with that kind of a lead time, that that there's a pretty generous amount of buffer time built in for anything that might come up. But nonetheless, people, I see where you're coming from. People could be buying things that don't get implemented for quite some time. Speaking of, would you say that, I guess, in some ways it's hard to differentiate against others. Are most users buying through the Magento Marketplace today, or a lot still coming straight to your site? Is it an interesting breakdown?
Yeah, I'd say that around 80% of buying directly from us, and then probably 20% of revenue goes through Magento Marketplace. So it's a valuable channel, but still we're selling more through our website directly.
So that gives you more opportunity to differentiate yourselves, because you're not being necessarily purchased just from a marketplace, a commodity site. You're actually, able to provide richer content and more unique experience yourself, just like you hope that merchants are able to.
Yeah. As we position ourselves, and we want to keep position ourselves as quality over quantity, so to say. And marketplace helps here, because merchants and development agencies know about the process that all extensions go through in order to be published there. So it's kind of a helping hand, but still, yeah, we have a chance to position ourselves in the way that we want, using our own website, using our resources.
That makes sense. And all of your Magento 2 extensions are in the marketplace, and it sounded like some of the Magento 1 extensions as well got submitted into that process. I have noticed historically, I know we talked a little bit about pricing between commerce and open source. Magento 2 extensions typically look a little bit more expensive than Magento 1. Is that partly because of that process of certification? Is it because of something intrinsic to Magento 2 itself, that the cost of building and maintaining an extension is a little bit higher? We also touched on there being a little bit of a smaller user base, perhaps, for Magento 2 compared to Magento 1, which was just a wider user base in the SMB market. Has that, have all those things kind of contributed to how you price a Magento 2 extension versus the list prices on M1 extensions?
Yeah, all these points are definitely also, as I said earlier, entry level is higher. So you cannot just take any developer who can code PHP. You need to know Magento framework. You need to adhere some standards. You need to have some experience with exactly with Magento working. So development costs are higher because of this as well.
Mm-hmm. So maybe you could buy a car a little bit cheaper in 2008 than you could in 2020, because now you have to have a rear view camera built in, and and airbags and all kinds of things that give or take. What was required as a hard requirement in vehicles. It's different emission standards that you've got to account for some of that. It's interesting how that whole process works.
The platform got more complicated. You need to consider such things as Gdpr compliance. Obviously, so it's the development is more complicated. You need to consider compatibility with Magento Enterprise, Magento Commerce platform. Even if we don't support some particular feature which is specific to Magento Commerce, we still need to be sure that nothing gets broken if it will be installed on Magento Commerce. So,
and because a lot of these things are so open, because they're meant to be customized and edited and to really be able to fit the wide range of users. Have you ever had problems with folks copying any of your work? I know that I do run into stories like that in the Magento ecosystem from time to time, where I guess, in some ways it's flattering that someone appreciates your work, but in other ways, economically, that can be a little bit challenging.
Yeah, that used to be a problem with Magento 1. I think there are even a few public places where you can find some information about us being copied. Like, we did some claims, there were some wars. Yeah. It's not really a case for Magento 2. At least it's not as noticeable for us. Like, perhaps minor things like design or UX decisions.
Yeah. It used to be the problem when someone just buy an extension from us and rename it
and sells it as their own.
And sells it as their own.
Very nice of them. Yeah, that's a good way to do business.
Some cases, and we spent some time just checking constantly Magento. Not Marketplace.
Connect.
Yeah, Magento Connect. So we were looking to demos and see if we can see the code which is identical to our ones. Our code we just started claiming is. It's not the case with Magento 2. At least we didn't notice any occurrences of exactly code stealing. But there is such thing as the code is just it doesn't matter what the code is if you steal the idea, and the idea is more important. And sometimes I see that not only so people copying some functionality and put it in their extensions. You can just see, you can take any extension, I think, in the Magento ecosystem, like RMA, for example, right? The purpose of the extension is clear, but when we come up with some feature, we do customer interviews, we just gain the knowledge why this feature is important, etc., and then we see that someone just copied without understanding what this feature actually does. So just putting some button or enabling some feature is not enough. You need to understand the reason behind this feature, what is needed. So it's sometimes it's clearly seen that someone just took the idea without understanding why is
plagiarism doesn't often work that well.
Yeah.
You turn in that book report in school and you never really read the book. That's hard when the teacher asks you a question. Very hard to support the extensions, I imagine, if you're selling something that you didn't write. Speaking of what the extensions actually do, I brought up GDPR earlier, and that's a topic that we hear a little bit less about today, but it's one that I actually wonder, what does a GDPR extension for Magento actually do? I understand the purpose of GDPR, and I happen to know a lot of the mechanics of it, a lot of the hard requirements, but what does an extension actually solve when it comes to GDPR?
When it comes to GDPR, so you know that GDPR is set of rights which allows a user to have something to be more
in control of their data.
Yeah, right. In control of their data, and our extension covers some of the rights. In total, I believe there are in total 14 rights, and we cover a right to be forgotten, which is basically you can demand to erase all your data. The right to access information, so that you as a user can just ask what information about me have you got, and the extension provide this information, helps to provide this information in a human readable form. Also, there is a right to transfer the information, which is kind of right to access, but it's the extension provides to helps to provide this information in machine readable form in XML, and also it collects customer consent for data processing. Again, about
so
GDPR,
it just does one little thing, huh?
Yeah,
Lots of moving parts.
Yes. Again, getting back to the ideas. So when GDPR just was coming into force, there was a lot of misunderstanding. What should merchant have? What extension should do? And there was some decisions made by other companies which are quite strange. So, for example, if a customer wants to erase their data, the extension would just erase everything, including sales orders, which is. But you should keep the sales data for other subjects like. So there are some laws that are higher than GDPR, for example, law that prevents money laundering. If you just delete all sales, you cannot do this, and this law says that in Europe, at least, you need to keep sales data for like 10 years, and it doesn't make sense if extension just even if it's not if it doesn't delete the orders themselves, it just corrupts all the data, so you cannot see who purchased it, purchased it.
Yeah, because it's all related data. It's a relational database, so I could see where that's going to become troublesome. Yeah. That's interesting. I haven't actually heard that particular issue before.
And this is quite a good example about those who made their homework and those who not.
Yeah.
So, so we did read all this GDPR
regulations. Yeah.
Yes, and the other people just read some blogs, which.
Copied someone else.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So this is exactly a good example of copying without understanding.
Yeah. Look, this is sometimes it's people wanting to hear what they hear, or they stop reading before they get to the end. I suppose we run into some of that with different compliances, and people want to think, oh, I'm using this secure payment gateway, and so I'm PCI compliant. Well, if your site's hacked and takes over the site, before the checkout or something else, doesn't mean that you don't have some implications, and that that the payment industry, from Visa and others down, are going to be very happy with you and really want you to continue to run credit cards, and that they're not going to look to fine you or do anything. That there's there are things that are required of people to play by certain rules. And rules are changing. So I know in the case of your team, there are, there's been adoption in the Magento industry of technology. Like I was really excited when Elasticsearch became available to Magento open source users. I imagine that that's, things like that have implications on existing extensions and on what your teams like yours do, just like MSI and B2B features and some of these other things that have been rolling out. Do you wind up having to go back and and adjust around some of those things that really change how a lot of users interact with Magento and what they're using in their native stack?
Not really. I think you see when a Magento release adds something to their core or just enables this feature for open source. It's another opportunity for us just to enhance our extensions better. So, for example, speaking of Elasticsearch, our layered navigation has already support for Elasticsearch when it was available only for Magento Commerce, and then when it become available for Magento open source, we just expanded our market for this, and also such releases helps us, not helps actually, because of these releases we just we cannot protest and do anything. You cannot stop the train, right? So we just have to adjust our own roadmap according to this. For example, again about layered navigation, when Elasticsearch has become available for everyone, we just made a huge refactoring and made the extension Elasticsearch first. It still works just on MySQL, but some features are not available in this mode of operation because they are made specifically for Elasticsearch. And because this is now a default search engine, we put a lot of investments in this channel.
And so I'm curious. I've been curious, because I've been on the agency side of things. I've been on the multi-channel integration side of things. I've spent now really invested myself into the web hosting side of things. And whether or not I'm always on the front lines for all support tickets, I get a lot of interesting stories and feedback, whether from the companies that I've been a part of or from partners. What do support issues look like for your team? I know, so we mentioned early on, there were a lot of folks that were, that basically, they didn't know how to turn on a cron job. But what does support look like today? What is it that keeps your team busy after the sale, in order to get people up and running and continue to keep them in that fashion?
Well, first of all, again, getting back to difference between M1 and M2, the situation changed quite drastically because in Magento 1 we had like more than 50% of technical issues were related to conflicts between extensions. Now this number is very low, just like 13% of inquiries are related to conflicts between the extensions, and another 13% are related to conflicts with themes. The biggest number of issues, it's about 30% or so, are related to store-specific problems, which you cannot predict. It may be even it may be related not only to specifics of your Magento instance. It can be something like PHP settings on a server, something like this. So you cannot predict this all. This is the majority of cases. Also, bugs is a very seasonal thing. Usually the amount of bugs is fluctuating between 15% to 25%, because when a new version of Magento gets released, everyone wants to update their store, and they find the bugs themselves even before we manage to test it and put it and release a new version. So
I imagine you have dozens and dozens and dozens of extensions, so it's near impossible to test them all immediately and have
Yeah.
every, and know of any potential or every potential bug immediately at, when something comes to general release. So
Yeah.
hopefully users have a little bit of patience if they're going to be early adopters and install something as soon as it hits general release.
Yeah. Luckily, again, because the workflow with Magento is now established with staging environment. So I think 99% of the customers have staging environment. So they don't put these bugs into production. Also, we've got, by the way, around 20% of issues, of technical issues, are not really issues, are free installations. So we offer this service free for everyone who purchased the extension. So we install it ourselves. We immediately see if there are any problems with the extension. So it gets fixed right away, and if there is some problem which should be added as a fix to the next version, we do this. So
yeah. And so if your team is helping in these regards, especially, maybe pre-installations, things like that, are there other times that support winds up being free or somehow, included? What does the normal support window look like for an extension? I imagine that, thinking about the length of, the life of a Magento 1 site, if something launched in, in the earlier 2000, maybe in 2010, very hard to continue to provide free support on an extension that's on a site that's still live in 2020.
So yeah, apart from free installations, we offer 90 days of free support for each of our extensions. That's the minimum. Customers can also extend it up to 60 days and then extend it even further. So within this window, all the support provided is free of any charges. Then again, even after the support period ends, if customers have extension-related issues that are actually bugs that are our fault, so to say, we will fix them free of charge, or we will provide them with a new version. So we are on the side of customer here all the time.
Yeah, and so and does that mean that patches, that you continue to put out basically free patches for your extensions if there are bugs or security issues, that's just something that a user can expect?
Moreover, we are just providing new versions free. So general road is, for example, a customer is outside support period. They just send a ticket to our help desk and say that there is something wrong with extension. Can you help me? The usual answer is try upgrading to the most recent version and get back to us if it's still not working. So this way, the customers are happy because as they say, they don't want to pay something for our bugs, which is fair.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And in a general best practice, they should be keeping their software up to date anyway, whether it's for PCI compliance or other compliance reasons, or whether it's just a general best practice. I know that there's time and cost that goes into that, especially if you have a lot of extensions, but it's, I don't think that keeping software up to date should be a big question for businesses, especially folks with e-commerce businesses that are, relying on customers being comfortable and the security of their site and sharing credit card information and, having all that run smoothly. So what's coming down the pike? Anything new, anything excited that we can expect from your team later this year? Any new extensions or anything cool coming?
So yeah, we are definitely going to expand our B2B line of products. This is the main area of investment for us at this point. Then we will focus heavily on the advanced subscription products extension as well. This is something that we see success with, and we want to further capitalize on it. And then, of course, there would be some smaller UX UI related extensions that we release every now and then anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
our plan.
Yeah.
For this year.
Well, plans change, especially in the world right now and in our industry in general. You have to be agile. You have to be flexible. But guys, I really appreciate all the time today. You've been very generous with your schedules, especially making your way to the office. I don't think I expected that. So when we scheduled, really, really appreciate you taking the time to share information and knowledge. Any final parting thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, as a product owner, I always want more feedback. There is no such thing as too much feedback. So if you've got anything to say, any suggestion, just drop us a line, submit a ticket to our support. All these tickets, I receive all these tickets and reply them. Also, you can find me on Twitter. The handle is quite difficult to spell.
I think we'll get that from you offline. We'll share that in the episode description in the notes.
Okay. So I'm open to actually the whole company is open to any kind of feedback, whether it's good or bad, because bad feedback sometimes is more valuable than a good one. Drop our suggestions to us and.
Yeah, and I'm also in charge of our partner relationships. So if you're a development agency or a marketing agency or any kind of agency or company that deals with merchants as a sort of intermediary, helps them grow, helps them build their stores, I would also be happy to get in touch and would be glad to discuss your needs and see where we can help more to help you drive your business and your merchant's business.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming on the podcast. For our listeners, I will include in that show description a few links, including for resources for merchants that are being impacted by the current economic crisis. We certainly want to see as many businesses not only survive but thrive in the current climate and thereafter. So. Keep an eye out for those. And, beyond that, any questions, any thoughts, you can reach us at JetRails across social media. Please feel free to subscribe and review the podcast wherever you watch it or listen to it, whether through your favorite podcast app or through YouTube or Facebook. And, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy selling.